88.9 WEIU-FM. Now it's time for Issues and Attitudes.
And a very good afternoon, everyone, on this November 29th, 2010. It's time for Issues and Attitudes. My name is Jeff Owens, director of WEIU-FM. My co-host, Belleville's favorite son, Joe Ostrowski.
Good to be back.
Joe's down to his final few shows before he graduates. And when we
like sand through the hourglass.
It's been a good run. So as we go, we'll talk a little bit more about Joe in the next couple shows. Our guest today, making his initial appearance, at least on radio down here, is Mr. Cameron Craig. He's a professor in the geography department here at EIU, also a climatologist, film producer, WEIU assistant weather person, or for lack of a better term, guy that we see in the hallways a lot. Cameron, we need to have you on, so welcome, Cameron Craig.
Thank you very much.
And we really want to talk a lot about some of the films you've produced and some of the things you've done with the students at WEIU. But before that, why don't we talk a little bit about your background and what led you to EIU and a little bit of your interest in the weather kind of thing, side of things.
Well, to start the long history, I started out as a music major. My mother said I couldn't do anything else in my life but music. And so then I got tired of doing all that. So then I got a degree in history, and then I worked towards a master's in geography, reconstructing Indiana's climate of the 19th century, using historical documents and journals and diaries from that period. And so I got into the weather. As a little kid, I was always into the weather, and I think most kids are. And and then I said, okay, it's time to do a PhD. And so that's what I'm doing right now, geographic education in documentary film work, using students' projects as a term paper. So,
very neat.
And tell us about that relationship with the students. How does that process play out in terms of educating students in climatology and letting them get hands-on experience?
I think that the big thing is getting outside and looking up at the sky. My weather and climate students have to complete a weather observation project. And so for every day of the month, they have to observe the weather, get outside, look at the clouds, identify the clouds, and then analyze it. And so it's a good pattern recognition, it's a good problem-solving skill that they don't get with many other courses. So I really think it's very important to give them that practice.
When you see somebody see something for the first time, tell us about that story. Like if a student doesn't get it at first, but then they're looking day after day at the sky. Tell us about the experience.
The experience is wonderful. I mean, what happens if a student takes my class, they find themselves looking up at the sky more often and say, oh, I know that. I know how that process works. So it's more exciting for them. The retention is higher. So they leave the class knowing a little bit more about the world they live in.
And then you also have a relationship with a lot of the weather forecasters here at the WEIU Television and Radio Center. Tell us about that, what it's like working with them, and then, the staying in touch process, after they leave here.
Right. The big thing is that we see broadcast meteorologists all the time. That's the big part of our watching the news. And so students that are interested in doing broadcast meteorology, they come to me, and then I start giving them daily practice. We just started a new class called the Broadcast Meteorology Practicum, which essentially they have to do daily broadcasts online. So the big thing is what's different about this university and our department is that we give them the daily practice that they need. And then when they complete that course, then they move on to WEIU Newswatch, and they do that live 5 days a week. Now, because we've had an increase in the number of students, we now have a weekend weather show, 5 minutes, but it still gives the students more opportunities. So it's a very good thing. We go to the National Weather Association. I sponsor students going there, and they take their broadcasts with them. And a lot of the professionals are really excited about what we're doing here at Eastern. What are you doing differently than what other universities are doing? It's the daily the daily broadcasts on a daily basis. I have a green wall in my office, and the students have access to it, and they do it whenever they can, every day. And that's the key, is doing it every day. You cannot become a concert pianist without practicing every day. And so like an art, like an instrument, weather broadcasting is an art. You have to practice it.
There you go.
And so what does that practice look like? A student comes in. Well, if you could just give us an example of a student's one day in that process.
Okay.
First as a student and then working at the station.
What happens is the student comes in and they look at all the weather models. Okay, they just don't look at the Farmer's Almanac. We don't use that at all. They look at the sky. They know what the conditions are outside right now. Then they look at the weather models, which they're okay. These are mathematical things that we use that gives us an idea of what we can expect over the next day. And then they put their numbers out, they interpolate, they use the science, they think about, what the conditions are, they look at the soil moisture, they understand what's happening with the temperature fluctuation, advection. These are all technical terms. And if any of my students are out there, they'll know. But and then they start drawing their maps out, and then they put their slides together, and then they start going, okay, what is the story? What is the weather story? And that is the most important aspect, is how are you going to convey what's happening right now to the future, to your audience? And that's very important. And so if you do it correctly, the audience remembers what's happening with the weather over the next few days. And so then they get up and they do a dry run, and they record it, and then we send it up online. So the one thing that they realize is that as the model's going out 7 days, it's not accurate. What is accurate, and I get to stand on my soapbox now, what is accurate is what's happening right now. It's very difficult science to predict. I mean, we still have trouble definitely predicting, earthquakes. But weather is very difficult because it's a big thing out there, and we do not have complete understanding of what.
And I would say in Central Illinois, it's even less predictable than in some places. Because
Right.
here, it's the old adage: if you don't know what the weather is, when you go outside, it'll change it in minutes. So, does the location that we're in also figure into some of your?
Yes, if we were in Florida, that'd be a whole different thing. It would be the same thing every day, a rain shower between 2 and 4, and then be over. Here we have cold air masses that come in from Canada, we have warm air masses coming from the Gulf, and so that is a huge fluctuation in our temperatures and precipitation experiences as well.
Okay, very interesting. I know that we want to talk a little bit. Maybe Kevin Jeans, one of our weather meteorologists here, or weathercaster at WEIU, left WEIU's program under a little bit of your tutelage and just got a job, I believe, in
Richmond,
Virginia.
Yes.
Correct? And that's a big market for someone to go from college to Richmond,
Exactly.
Virginia. So I think that shows that's a kudos to you and a kudos to Kelly
Thank
and
you.
everybody at Newswatch. So Joe, there you have 3 weeks to get a job. We'll be talking about you. All right.
We will see.
This past summer, you had I will say you had the luxury, even though you're going to kind of a horrible event, but you had the chance to go with some EIU students to do a little bit of documentary work down near the Gulf oil spill, and talk about the experience of what it was like to actually be on the ground at the oil spill, and the documentary that you did, I believe, Returning to Paradise. Let's talk about that for at length if we can.
The big thing is that right after the event happened, the horizon exploded. I was thinking, I really would like to get some footage of this oil spill. And initially, I'm like, it's $400 for a flight down there. I'd be going by myself, and it'd be just too much of an expense. And I thought, okay, well, we'll just wait, because I wanted to get some footage for the ongoing series, Expedition Nature's Realm, which Kevin Jeans and I produced and directed. But then, after talking to some members of the Center for Academic Technology Support, there was a little bit of, okay, let's really do this. And so I started to pull in some money from different departments, and we left June 17th with 3 other students, Zach Nugent, Mike Ismondi, and AJ Schubert, all very excited about going down there. We kept talking about what's the plan? What's the plan? In my work as a geographer in filming, I want things to happen to me. And so without trying to go with a plan, because if you go with a plan, then you're
locked in.
You're locked in,
yeah.
and then things don't work out the way you planned. So if you go down there and just let it happen to you, that's a whole different experience. So we went down there, remembering all the images that we've seen on TV over and over and over again. We get down there, Grand Isle, where the heart of the situation was, where we see all these creatures just engulfed in oil. We get down there, it's gone. We see the booms out on the beach, but there's nothing. You see residue of oil. It was cleaned up. And what's very interesting, that another alum from Eastern went down there the week before and took several photographs. Showing the oil on the beaches and all the tar balls and everything. Looking at that, they cleaned it up within a week, and that was very exciting. So we're standing there, Zach and I are standing there, thinking, what's going on? Where's the story? going down there without something. But in our minds, we had all of those media images. And so then it dawned on me, the perception. The perception of people here in East Central Illinois keep seeing these images over and over and over, and that gives us the idea, well, it's death and destruction down there along the Gulf. So then we traveled on we got which was very exciting, a media flight sponsored by the government. And we got to take a flight, 1-hour flight around the Mobile Bay area. And then we talked to a hotel vice president of Marriott about the booms that they were doing for their property, beachfront property. And then we got to Dauphin Island, which is just 25 miles south of Mobile Bay, or Mobile. And that was probably the best experience that we had in knowing what was going on. And we talked to one group of people on a porch. Some of them were in the real estate business. And we spent 1 hour with them, and we have it on film, and that's probably the essence of the film. The backbone of the film is how they had to change their routine day to day, how they had to teach their children what to do and what not to do, the uncertainties of the near future, those kind of things. And this is where the title came from, is that the documentary film focuses on the voices of the human spirit, because that is what it is. We see all these images, but we don't know exactly what is happening to the residents of this area. And so that's where the title came from, Returning to Paradise, because they got done dealing with Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
And so then they're having to deal with this now. So they want to return back to paradise because it is paradise. And so, they're still dealing. Now, it's been 6 months since, and we're planning to go back again to interview these same people this coming Christmas break.
That's neat. And what do you expect? I mean, I know you've talked to, I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff that's happened in the past 6 months. You hear about the success stories down there, but what do you expect when you talk to those people, what they're going to tell you?
It's going to be the economical situation. When we were down there, we tried to get a ship shrimper to talk to us, and the wife said, well, if you came yesterday, you could have, but we're under contract with BP now, so we can't talk to you. And I'm like, okay. And so, things like that. We were very happy with the council members that helped us, showed us around the island. It would be interesting to see, again, not going down there with an idea of what to expect, but we just want them to tell their story, a true documentary. That's what we're trying to attempt here, is a true documentary where there is no, we don't want to put in our own thoughts. So,
go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to ask. One thing I'd heard quite a bit about in other media outlets is that there was a limitation on access to some of these sites for, say, film crews. Did you encounter that at all?
No, not at all. In fact, the Grand Isle, as we parked at the park there on the east end of the island, and we started going over the dunes, and you see the water and the pelicans flying, and then off to the right-hand side behind this tarp type of structure was a sheriff's car, and a big sheriff in there. And I said, okay, let's just keep walking. We're just going to keep walking. Because prior to that, we did hear those things that they were arresting people with cameras. And here we are. We've got 3 different cameras with us. And we're going down toward the boom. And then I hear all of a sudden behind me, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, okay, that was my first heart attack. And so I said, you guys just stand here and don't move. Don't think or anything. And I went to talk to this man. He goes, what are you doing? And I said, well, we're from Eastern Illinois University, and we're here to document the oil spill, etc. Okay, well, just as long as it's fine, as long as you don't pass the orange booms. If you do, you have to be decontaminated, which is not pleasant.
Doesn't sound like pleasant.
No, not at all. And so we obeyed. And then the second law enforcement drove up, screeching on the beach, and that was my second heart attack. And I said, he asked me what I was doing. I said, well, we're from Eastern Illinois University. He goes, oh, University of Illinois? And I said, yeah, why not? And he goes, great school, go on. And I'm like, well, you got the university wrong, but that's okay. So
That's kind of neat. That's really neat. I know you don't know a lot about when you talk about having a plan, but when you're down there this time or the original time this summer when you're talking to them, are people concerned that there's still a lot of oil left somewhere in the bay because it really wasn't quote unquote as bad as they thought it was going to be, but there's concerns for the near future or even the long term 10, 20 years down that some of that stuff may seep back in.
Yeah, the big thing is that recently they no more shrimp fishing. For the time being, because they found traces of oil within the shrimp. So there's that concern. But there's also the bottom feeders. In other words, the creatures that live on the bottom of the Gulf that are getting into this oil. We're going to see the effects of this for years to come. The Exxon Valdez situation, years and years and years ago, we're still seeing effects of that. So this is nothing going to be wiped out, anytime soon. We're going to see this for a long, long time.
Okay. When you talk about the returning to paradise, I mean, is this something is it going to be when you go back around Christmas time, will this be the finality, or is it going to be something you want to continue to maybe look at as your future film?
I think that when we go back and talk to the same individuals, that will be the extent of the entire project, the Returning to Paradise. We're looking at probably an hour and a half, depending on the amount of material that we have. Again, we're trying to keep it, a true documentary where the people are telling their story without a lot of narration or voiceover. Because I don't want to, with Expedition Nature's Realm, that was my moment to interject a little philosophy of our coexistence with nature. Here, it's a situation that is currently happening, will continue to happen, and I want the people down there to tell their story. That's very important. I'm 800,000 miles away. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so that's very important to let them just tell their story.
Is it your goal, hopefully, that this gets, obviously WEIU is going to air it. Is it your goal to get this out, to across the country,
Yes.
across the world?
Yes, in some way, in some manner. It's very small, a very small project as far as, money-wise. But I think it's very important that we communicate some of these stories. A lot of these, many of these people have a lot to say about, their condition.
They weren't at all nervous or apprehensive. Why is a station,
No,
from the middle of Illinois?
Actually, they were very helpful. We were just before we arrived to the island, we were at a gas station, and somebody came up to us and said, "Are you from PBS?" And yeah, can you do something about those cooking shows? Well, not our particular station, but So the big thing is that you should talk to so and so on the island because they know a lot what's going on down there. And so, yeah, that was very helpful.
Now, if someone wants to see the segment from this summer, missed it over the course of the summer, what would be the best way for them to do that?
We have it on our website. We will have it on our website. We haven't released anything but a promo yet. I have the hour-long interview that is exclusively seen by students here at Eastern Illinois University as part of their educational experience, because it does show a lot of the changes of perception. What I am doing with my dissertation is, prior to showing that 1 hour interview uncut, I have the students write an essay of their perception of the oil spill. And
like before they see it?
Before they see it, and then they write a post-perception essay. And there's a big change in a lot of the things that you see is, this is not what I have seen in the media. And that's the big thing, is that our perceptions have changed when an instructor goes to whatever landscape, goes down to the Gulf and films there, or a geographer takes a video camera out to the Great Plains or to to Ireland or whatever. The students are exposed to these new things from their own instructor.
It reminds me of when Katrina hit, which was on a Monday, prior to an Issues and Attitudes show. And people forget this, and I've said this forever. That morning on CNN and Fox, Hurricane Katrina was not as bad as everybody said. That's what they were saying. In fact, if I had the recording of the Issues and Attitudes that day, we'll even going on the air that day at noon and said it doesn't appear it's going to be as bad because the water was still going inland and it wasn't coming out and causing all the damage. And I still think people forget that Fox and CNN were both reporting it looks like it's going to be okay down there. And then later that afternoon,
it was bad.
Is when it got bad. And it was one of those things that, of course, Fox and CNN never, ever talk about that they, quote, unquote, are a little bit to blame for some of that misperception early because of what happened. It's really funny that's never talked about anymore.
Well, and the one
it's
thing
all George
about
Bush's fault. I was wondering, was he watching CNN and Fox in the morning and saying, "Oh, it doesn't appear as bad"? You think about that though; it's perception, and it's really weird.
That's right. And when the one of the things that the residents kept saying is that the images that you're seeing are for Grand Isle weeks ago, and they keep playing. The media keeps playing those images. And people get this, well, I'm not going to go to my vacation in Florida because the oil's headed that way.
Yeah.
And so that was, that's bad. And when we see this, we're like, well, Dauphin Island is like great. People are out there swimming and
the
being
gloom
on the
and doom
beaches.
stories.
The gloom and doom stories come to reality that there's actually nothing major.
Interesting.
Now, you mentioned the effect on students' perception. Is this something you see happening more in classroom settings, bringing, I guess you could say, video journalism or video documentary film?
Yes.
And how would that explain that usage?
Let me go back about 80, 90 years. And the Dust Bowl of the about 80 years. Dust Bowl of the 1930s. Kevin Jeans and I produced another film, which is my favorite. It's my cup of tea, Stinging Dust and Forgotten Lives, which is aired on WEIU. I show this for my weather and climate students and my Spaceship Earth students, senior seminar. And I go, before I show them this film, I go, how many of you have heard of the Dust Bowl? And a lot of them go, oh, yeah, I've heard of it. Can you explain to me what has happened? What happened during that time? Oh, just dust blowing all around. They don't understand how harsh and how big of a struggle it was for humanity at that time. They watch it and they go, wow, that's really depressing. I didn't realize that actually happened to that magnitude. And those things, because we're so far removed, we have to have more films like this that change the perception of our students, for historical purposes, because we must learn from the past in order to make the future better, right? And so, these kind of films, and that's where my dissertation is kind of playing into, is if an instructor can go to any location, film it, bring it back, you're going to change your students' perception of that location.
And certainly easier than bringing the student to the location.
Exactly, especially when we're talking about going to a state park.
And one of the things that I think we should say here is in a little interjection or self-promotion is this is where PBS really comes into play because we have more time on the station. We can do more shows like this to tell the story, and this is where public broadcasting really needs to come to the forefront. And with public stations being under the gun in Washington D.C. and Springfield, if you want stories like this, if you cut public funding for PBS, they're never going to appear again,
right?
In the form that you want, uncut and real story,
value.
Educational.
Yes.
So there's our there's self-promotion, but I think that's where the story is, and this is where the neat part of what you do and the Ken Burdens of the world do. They bring these stories to the forefront so people can actually learn a little bit about the country they live in, and so. In the scheme of things, call your senators and call your congressmen and tell them that there's a reason for the WEIUs and WILLs and WSIs, all the stations that, not that the other stations don't matter, but we matter on a different level, and I think it's important.
Well, and I think it was about a week ago, I was listening to one of the NPR weekend shows, and they had about a 10-minute program on issues of French wine overproduction and over-harvesting of French grapes and how this was a big economic crisis for France. Well, you could never, on a commercial station, spend 6 minutes, 8 minutes talking about French grapes. But, I mean, it's a serious problem for a lot of people.
Right.
Exactly. The other thing is we don't want to. You are the faculty laureate this year for Eastern Illinois University. Quite an award. Tell us what it means, and then what you'll be able to use by being that. What doors does that get you into?
Well, it's not so many. It's not the doors. It's just the fact that I get to interact with my students. I think that is the most important aspect of being a faculty laureate, is that you provide such a foundation for your students that they leave Eastern knowing more about the world they live in. You give them opportunities that other universities probably would not give. And so it's very important for me. I'd like to have that. If I don't teach all year, in the summer, I get very depressed. And I have to have that student interaction. I have to have that question. It's like Kevin and Jeans and I, for Expedition Nature's Realm, we're headed out west. We didn't have any idea what we were going to do. We're just driving out through the Great Plains towards Yellowstone. That was it. And then the questions. He would ask questions that required a philosophical viewpoint. And it was very exciting. I learned from that. That is faculty laureate to me. It is the ability to give experiential learning opportunities for your students and learning yourself. So faculty laureate, I was very excited when I received word that I received it this year. And then speaking in front of 2,000 students at Prowl, that was exhilarating. And so it feels very good being the first annually contracted faculty member to receive it. So, along with Keith Spears, who also received it.
So people will be signing up for your classes as early as they can.
That's right, and register quickly, because what happens is the senior seminar closes within 3 minutes after it's open. So it's
and Spaceship Earth has been around forever here at
yes,
Eastern.
it has.
I remember.
Yes, it has.
Even when I was here at Eastern, way back in the dark ages, as Joe would say. So, a couple minutes left. Let's talk about. We have to ask you this, since you are into weather. When will be the first major snowfall this fall? Come on, we're putting you on the spot.
You got that right. We're going to expect a slight chance of snow flurries tomorrow. We did have snow flurries, a little bit of snow last Thursday, Thanksgiving. But you know what? We don't do that. I tell my students we don't do that.
I had to ask him. Now, I know one of the things you talked about Kevin Jeans, Lane Sylvester's over at WAND.
That's right.
You also stay in touch with the students after
Yes.
they leave, much like we do here at the Radio and TV Center. Talk about what a question Lane would call you up and say, Kevin, Cameron, I have this problem, and talk about that interaction. We have about a minute left. So.
Okay, it's basically any severe weather situation, they want to reassure themselves of their thinking, and so I'm more than happy to if it's 2 a.m. in the morning and I receive a call from one of the students, I am there to help them, and then things like the business. What should I do? Hey, would you have a look at my broadcast and give me some pointers? Kevin Jeans is now this weekend. He actually sent me 3 broadcasts, consecutive broadcasts, so that he could submit them to the NWA SEAL committee, so he can get a seal of approval. And so I looked at him. I said, okay, now this is good. Stop overthinking. That's the big thing. Is the students are overthinking too much.
So we got to have you back, Cameron. We didn't get through half the stuff we wanted to. Appreciate everything you've done, and I want to talk about some of your future productions and things. So we'll have you back in the spring semester and talk a little bit more about Cameron Craig, EIU Geology.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. Joe, we'll talk to you next Monday. This is Hit Mix.